From deep within an icy but windy and now sort of sunny and slightly muddy radioactive meme land, we are the survivors of the alt-right apocalypse. The few, the brave, the bitchy, once more wading into battle against the froggy hordes with Rantzerker number 84. Muslims don't kill people. Men kill people. If you're listening to this after the live show and you didn't actually hear that extended exchange between me and Karen and her dog, because you're listening to the abridged version, which has none of the bullshit in it, and you want to hear the full stream for whatever goddamn reason.
Yeah, whatever kind of psychotic, masochistic reason you might want. I don't know, I guess maybe you feel like you were really bad to your parents when you were a kid and you need punishment now.
Whatever reason you can give yourself, you want to hear the full stream, go to www.honeybadgerradio for our unabridged podcasts, or look up to the right of this video. There is a link to go directly to the unabridged version on YouTube. And also, there is a playlist of our unabridged shows called Honey Badger Uncut that you can access on YouTube.
It's not Muslims or people with mental health problems who are the most likely to kill you in a terrorist attack. It's men. These men were not extremists existing outside of society. They are products of it. Toxic masculinity demands inequality.
There is a problem in the fact that men are more likely to take action, right? And they're more likely to take action in a number of ways, not all of them good. They are more likely to be the bystander who sees flames coming out of a fucking building and just takes it upon himself to run inside and save the old lady and her cat, right? That's almost always going to be a man too, right? Men are more likely to take actual noticeable action. That's just, we just have to, that's not toxic masculinity. Mm-mm. When men take action, it can be bad action or it can be good action. It can be harmful or it can be helpful. But the fact that they are more likely than women to take action in any given situation, right, is not a reason to say, and therefore mass murders are the fault of men.
I'm going to put something in here too. Men are more likely to take action, yes, but every man who takes action is someone's hero. This man is someone's hero.
Yes.
And we are going to blame him instead of the people who consider his actions heroic. Like, yeah. I think about that. If he wasn't considered... No, I mean, there are always going to be the isolated criminals, serial killers, etc., who are just completely off the wall. But yeah, if this is taking place, it's taking place in a context where this man thought that his actions were heroic. If you're just going to look at this and say, oh, it's just men doing it, no. Because I guarantee if there wasn't a group of people out there telling this man that these actions are heroic, he wouldn't have done them.
And those people aren't all men either.
Mm-mm. No. And in fact, it is the women in the group who consider these actions heroic who are more influential. And there are studies that actually support that. There's, research looking into these particular cultures, these particular groups, to support the idea that the women in the groups are more influential in cultivating terrorist acts, in recruiting terrorists, and keeping the group together. And the reason why is because every man on the planet wants to be a hero in the eyes of a woman. One of my sources is The Female Jihad, Al-Qaeda's Women, by Katharina von Knopp. I'm just going to read a little bit from the abstract. When women carry out a suicide attack, they undermine the idea of who and what a terrorist is. What is generally not realized is the extent to which women are involved in terrorism. The purpose of this article is to explore and analyze the multifaceted roles of women in the movement of Al-Qaeda. The argument is that the role of women the world audience perceives is one of suicide bomber, but the role of ideological supporter and operational facilitator is more important for the maintenance of the operational capabilities and the ideological motivation for a terrorist organization. This article argues that the women follow a gender-specific interpretation of the radical ideology, the female jihad. The concept of the female jihad means that women carry out a political act by supporting their male relatives, educating their children in the ideology, and facilitating terrorist operations. The female jihad is defective when women follow the male jihad interpretation by carrying out attacks. For the survival of a terrorist organization, women are more important when they follow the female version of the ideology because the men could get arrested, die in an attack, or could get shot by the security forces. The women continue to take care of the financial issues of the organization and continue to educate the children in the right belief. So essentially, because women are more likely to survive, they follow a different model that ensures the continuance of terrorist operations. And they do so by controlling the finances and the teaching of the ideology and the motivating of terrorists. So I'm just, you know, if you want to just look at this as a one-sex thing, you're not going to get anywhere with it. Here's another thing. When we center Muslim women as these vulnerable, delicate little petals who are being crushed not just by their own men, according to the narrative of the right, but also by Western men, according to the narrative of the left. When we center Muslim women as the most vulnerable, the most delicate, the most just
victimized.
We have to save them. They're so precious. And we bring them in and we give them political clout and we center them as a vulnerable class. And you can see from the intersectional hierarchy of vulnerability that they go right to the top, which means that they will inherit the entire lobbying apparatus of the feminist movement. When we do that, don't be surprised that they come in and they end up radicalizing disenfranchised Western men. And they just create a new terrorist cells out of our men. All of what we see, you don't see the women because they're in the background keeping this going.
Yep.
And the studies show, and there's more and more research coming out regarding the importance of the sisterhood in these terrorist cells and perpetuating terrorism. You know, and that's not to say that every Muslim woman who comes to the West is going to end up doing this kind of thing. It's to say that they are not necessarily the innocent lambs that the West wants to paint them as.
There was that woman, feminist woman, I don't know her name, but she said on a talk show, Islam is the most feminist religion. And there were people who were sharing it to say, ha ha ha, that's so hilarious because no way is that true, that's so funny. And I was like, no, actually, if you follow feminism to its, like, you know, ultimate conclusion, it results in Sharia. Because you got to protect women. Protect the women, protect the women, protect the women, protect the women, and make sure that they know how much constant danger they're in. That's where it's going to land. And they're going to love it because they're going to be like, I feel so safe in my burqa.
Yeah, don't you know that like hiding your features under a burqa, under a hijab, all that is just protecting you from the male gaze.
It is protecting you from the men. Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly how they frame it.
From the toxic male gaze, yeah. And it's really they do frame it in the sense of it's not necessarily even to protect women from being raped by men who can't control themselves. It's to protect women from the indignity of being looked at by unworthy men.
As the attacks mount up, the individual profiling descends into morbid freefall, and we overlook the most basic commonality. These crimes were all committed by men. In fact, almost all mass murders are committed by men. This is no coincidence. I will not name these vile, violent men. Not just because this would give them the recognition they wanted, although you did say Omar Mateen just a little while ago, but whatever. But because it's unhelpful. Instead, we need to name the real culprit. Toxic masculinity. Skillinity. Toxic masculinity is what entitles a man to take a weapon and take other people's lives in the name of his values. Toxic masculinity enforces the idea that being a man means not just being strong, but showing that strength through violence and fear. It means always being the one in control, having power and dominance over others at all times by any means. All right, Allison, go ahead.
Don't women? But there are female suicide bombers too.
If typical masculinity promotes emotional disconnection, something that men's mental health charities are already trying to combat, toxic masculinity goes one step further and promotes the absence of empathy altogether. It also promotes the dismissal of anything deemed feminine and the hatred of anything that contradicts heteronormative ideals around what it means to be a man. The easiest way to think of it is to imagine the military. After all, soldiers are paid mass murderers. Different wars, same tactics. You fucking assholes. Do you realize, like, what people who you know, are veterans have go through to protect your ass? Okay, I'm sorry, that's not in the article. That was just me getting mad. Okay.
No, I understand.
However,
I wanted to point out something
go ahead.
where they said men's mental health charities are already trying to combat emotional disconnection. Bullshit. If men's mental health charities operate within the feminist model, they are essentially telling men that they have mental health issues despite being overwhelmingly privileged. That they are hurting despite being carried in litters made of gold by minorities and women, despite having every advantage. You tell that to people who are having mental health problems, you tell that to men who are having mental health problems, you are not part of the solution. You are part of the problem. And that is the rant that I want to do to that. And don't worry about that, Brian. I'm pissed at what they said about the military, too.
All right.
Yeah, that feeling when I learned my sister is a mass murderer.
Well, is she in the military?
Well,
yes.
she was for over 20 years, yeah.
Well, you know, if it's a woman in the military, that means that she was just brainwashed and dragged there against her will. So she didn't want to do anything. They actually tortured her and made her do stuff in the military, which she probably has to live with for the rest of her life because they are the toxic ones. And she was just a woman that was just.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Like how bloody sheltered is this person to be able to say something like that?
Must be nice
like,
to be a journalist.
Bringing up the military as though that's even remotely related to civilian life. Not to mention the fact that a lot of military officers like don't even see combat or anything, but treating military combat the same way that you would treat a criminal mass murderer is just offensively ignorant.
Yeah.
Like, fuck off. Right,
and then also just generally treating masculine behavior as though it is psychotic and pathological. Like there's some, and the thing is, how is it that men like could, on the one hand, engage in the ultra apparently what is bloody mass murder on a government-funded scale, and yet somehow manage to resist being toxically masculine enough to engage in jobs like being paramedics and firemen and, you know, police officers and bodyguards and fucking Boy Scout, troop leaders and caregivers and doctors and so on. No, that's got to be really hard to resist just killing a man that's laying there on your table when you're trying to perform surgery because that masculinity is coming out and it's making you want to just murder somebody.
Well, what drives me crazy is there is a lot of shit that needs to be done in the world that requires a certain detachment from your emotions, a certain ability to set your own emotions aside, particularly fear, grief, anxiety, uncertainty, right? Those things. And I'm sorry, my dog is whining, but essentially there are a whole bunch of necessary tasks that require that. And men are the ones who overwhelmingly do these. Set aside your own personal feelings. I don't want to get up in a fucking cherry picker in this wind and rainstorm to fix this power line, right? Because it's cold and it's unpleasant and it's fucking a little bit scary and nerve-wracking because the wind's blowing 80 kilometers an hour and I'm in this little fucking box next to these freaking live gigantic wires that can pump so much electricity through me that, I'll be dead instantly. yeah, this is really not what I would like. I would really love to be working in a climate-controlled office writing articles about toxic masculinity, but unfortunately, this is my fucking job.
However, toxic masculinity has its roots in the everyday. To prove this, we should look no further than the fact a significant number of these killers were domestic violence perpetrators, not just these killers, but the majority of mass murderers. The men who massacre the public...
So, okay, so basically what she's saying is, it's very interesting to note that violent men are violent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep going, Brian, though.
All right. The men who massacre the public are the same men who butcher women privately in their own homes. The same principles of power, control, fear, and violence apply. Instead of using violence to instill fear in one woman, they scale it up to instill fear across nations. These men walk among us, everywhere.
I just had something that I really wanted to rant about because this was probably the paragraph that pissed me off the most in this article. In fact, they are absolutely not the same men who butcher women privately in their own homes, because the motivations are usually completely different. Think like the difference between a crime of passion versus a crime of opportunity, or reactive violence versus predatory violence. A man who snaps and kills his wife after she's nagged at him one too many times is in a completely different mindset from somebody who seeks out a gay nightclub because he takes issue with homosexuality and begins opening fire in the middle of a crowd of people. Somebody who says something like this has absolutely zero insight into the way most violent crimes happen. And if this person has zero insight into why most violent crimes happen, then why the fuck should they be given a platform to talk about this shit?
If we want this violence to stop, we need to address the root cause and its everyday manifestations before they escalate. These men were not extremists existing outside of society. They are products of it. They were men drunk on the entitlement that patriarchal cultures serve them.
Oh, is this woman actually admitting that Islam is a patriarchal culture?
Well, it's lovely to see the tightrope they walk, eh?
That it's a patriarchy and all of the misogyny and rape culture and subjugation of women and subordination of women and all of that and the homophobia and all of those things that go along with patriarchies, that Islam is actually one of those really, really awful, big, terrible, horrible, awful, no good, really bad patriarchies.
Toxic masculinity finds expression in fascism, sexism, white supremacy, Islamophobia, xenophobia, jingoism, capitalism, and homophobia, rape culture, and patriarchy in the glamorization of military culture. All of these things are bad. So Islamophobia is bad, even though this is coming out. Oh, no, it's not, because the case she's making is it's not Islam that created this guy. It's being a man. It's just being a male.
So she's not Islamophobic, and she can't be a misandrist because misandry don't real.
Yeah. Toxic.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Toxic masculinity finds expression in aggressive fear politics that divides and breeds hate. And as a more right-wing, controlling government takes power, we only fuel the fire. There it is!
There you go. There it is.
There it is. It's gotta get that in there. Jesus.
This article isn't divisive and doesn't breed hate. Men are all to blame. Not this individual man, but all men.
It's like
that's not divisive.
It's like the feminist the feminist checklist of progressive talking points. You just got to get, you got your list of things. You have to get white supremacy in there. You got to get xenophobia, Islamophobia, patriarchy, rape culture. You got to check those boxes. And now it's got to get in some Republicans and some Trump. Yep. Got to get that in there.
Oh yeah.
We have to go into the after show. We have very little time for it. Okay. Our after show is once again making crab eyes at you. I think it is. Making sexy crab eyes at you. And we're covering a very interesting commercial. And if you want to get the Doge to Australia, www.feedthebadger.com. The after show, www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio.